Welcome everybody to our second session. And as you can see, it's the condolences and support. It's the condolences and support session. And we have a lot of distinguished guests with us that will be joining us and speaking. This thing keeps falling. I guess I'm going to use, can you give me a microphone if you don't mind? And yeah, one of the other ones. I think this one is not working properly. No, there's, yeah, the big one, the big one. Yeah. No, this one's not working. We'll get this one. Yeah, this one works. This one works better. Sure, I'll give it to you later. As many of you know, we have suffered a catastrophic disaster in northwest Syria and southeast Turkey, where over 52,000 innocent lives perished. And this session is to honor the memory of all of those who have perished in Syria and Turkey. As soon as the earthquake happened, 2 days later, Becker, myself, and Jude visited the Turkish embassy and our friends, and they're with us here today. Thank you for joining us. And it was a beautiful scene, seeing all of the people, from Turkish people in the country, in the U.S., going to the embassy, bringing everything they could to share with their brothers in the country. And we said to ourselves, me, Becker, and Jude said, why would we, as Syrians, not have that? We would love to have an embassy that would actually care for its citizens just as the Turkish embassy did for their citizens. God bless you for doing that, and hopefully one day we will have the safety for Syria. We have, our first speaker is Congressman Joe Wilson. He represents the 2nd Congressional District of South Carolina. He is a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he chairs the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia Subcommittee. He is also the most senior member of the House Armed Services Committee and serves on many others. I did not mention he's a Republican. You know why? Because I know he works with everybody to get stuff done, especially for our people in Syria. Without further ado, I give you Congressman Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And ladies and gentlemen and friends of Syria and Turkey, it is such an honor for me to be here today. And the great thing is that we can tell you the people of America have great appreciation and affection for the people of Syria and Turkey, but actually we even have a resolution that proves it, and the votes that prove it. And it's bipartisan. It was so positive. The vote expressing sympathy and support for the people of Turkey and Syria. It was 410 to 2, and that's just unheard of. And we all know that so often the media covers disagreements between Republicans and Democrats, but this is living proof for you of the appreciation and affection for the people of the region. And it's just such a positive expression of how much we appreciate the people of Syria and Turkey. And then I grew up with that, and that growing up in South Carolina, we have a very dynamic community of, it's called Syrian Lebanese, and also the Turkish American community is so well appreciated, and they're appreciated as engineers, doctors, elected officials. And so my home state has been blessed by the diaspora from the region. With the most current horrible circumstance of the earthquake, it is so impressive to me that immediately the United States came to the aid of the citizens in such a real way. It was remarkable that the runway at Incirlik Air Base was not destroyed. I met with the head of the general who was in charge of the logistics command, and immediately there was an ability, because of the capability of the runway, and sadly the civilian airport nearby was not able because of the fissures in the runway, but Incirlik was right there, 125 miles away, to provide immediate aid to the people of Turkey. It was just such an inspiring act by Americans, and it was done really by service members there who just on their own immediately came to the aid of their local neighbors, and then the American government itself came through with the United States Agency of International Development and others to provide aid immediately. Again, indicating the affection that we have and appreciation. And another part of the appreciation indeed is the membership in NATO by Turkey, and that is that I always like to remind people that if you ever want to know of the great appreciation of Turkey, all you have to do is go to Korean War Memorial on the mall, and as you look at the countries that serve together to preserve freedom and liberty for the people of the Republic of Korea, there was Turkey listed as a member of NATO. And going back, can you imagine, 70 years? But that goes back much further to 1923 with our association and again appreciation of Turkey, and then our hope for the people of Syria. What a country it could be once it's liberated and once the Assad regime passes away, to be succeeded, as we know, by talented people who can be a vital part of the Middle East and a part of the world that is so critical to provide freedom and opportunity for people around the world. And so again, I'm just grateful to be here, and I hope everybody gets a copy of it. I'll be leaving several of these. It really is, think about it again now, how many bills have y'all heard? 410 to 2, not many. And so it's such an affirmation of the appreciation of Turkey and Syria and our hopes for a brighter future and recovery as quickly as possible. And I know that with the representatives here from the State Department, from the United States Agency of International Development, that every effort, and again, a bipartisan way, is coming together to address such a catastrophe that is almost inconceivable. I also need to let you know that I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and we had an earthquake August the 31st, 1886. It was the largest earthquake on the East Coast. It was felt as far away as Milwaukee and Boston. And it was such a traumatic experience that it's still, we still recognize it almost 150 years later. And so this is something that I personally identify with, and again, we just hope and we'll be working for the recovery as quickly as possible. And then I want to extend, as I conclude, an invitation. I've got our office, 1436 Longworth House office building. All you have to do is come in and say, Joe said come by, and they'll take you to the window, and you'll be standing there, and you'll look at the office, and you'll see a statue of Camille Ataturk. And so that will remind you right away of my appreciation of the region. And so you don't have to call, come by, just say, Joe said come by. Thank you, and best wishes on the recovery and all the world coming together for the people of Syria and Turkey. Thank you.
Unfortunately, the congressman has to leave, and it was very, very short, but thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
I think your microphone's working, it's just this one that doesn't work.
Okay.
By the way, we do have a book, a signature book that you can use to sign condolences to the victims of the tragedy of the earthquake in Syria and Turkey. We have it in it's right there with it. If anybody wants to sign it, please do write something. It's nice, it's a nice gesture to have for future generations to see it as well. Our next speaker is DAS Deputy Assistant Secretary Ethan Goldrich. He's He serves as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs with responsibility for the Levant and Syria engagement from 2018 to 2021. He served as Foreign Policy Advisor to the Commanding General of the Joint Special Operations Command from August 2018 to June 2021. He also served as the Director of the Office of the Levant Affairs and Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary in the U.S. Department of State, where he had responsibility for Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. Without further ado, I give you Deputy Assistant Secretary Ethan Goldridge.
Thanks, George. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And also, thank you to the Citizens for a Secure and Safe America for inviting me to speak at today's event. I've spoken at several of the C4SSA events, and as always, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with your members and the members of the Syrian American community about U.S.-Syria policy, and also to hear feedback on the issues that affect Syrians inside and outside of Syria. Also pleased to be joined this time by my colleague, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator Larry Sachs from the U.S. Agency for International Development's Bureau of Humanitarian Affairs. So allow me to begin by extending the United States' heartfelt condolences to all those affected and suffering as a result of the earthquakes that have claimed the lives of approximately 10,000 Syrians inside the country and across the border in Turkey. Many members of the Syrian American community, including some of you here today, have lost loved ones, friends, and colleagues during the tragedy. Over the past 12 years, we've witnessed the horrors the Syrian people have had to endure, including bombardments, chemical weapons attacks, torture, and arbitrary detention. And time again, we see how Syrians have rushed to help fellow Syrians. In the aftermath of the earthquakes, first responders like the White Helmets rushed to the scene to deliver life-saving aid. Syrians suffering from over a decade of war donated the little that they have to help other Syrians in need. Syrian American doctors traveled to Syria to provide life-saving emergency medical treatment. Syrian American organizations mobilized to support relief efforts and magnify the pleas for direct assistance into northwest Syria. And I know in the initial days after the earthquake, I was talking with Mohammed Bakr al-Gabais right away about what was happening and what the U.S. government was doing. Thank you for your efforts, and rest assured the United States is determined to do all it can to help the people of Syria. We continue to work hard to deliver aid to the Syrian people and expand humanitarian access across the country, and the U.S. government is working closely with our international and local humanitarian partners to identify ways to get even more aid into northwest Syria. We are also considering what more can be done, working with local actors and regional counterparts. Over the past month, including in a meeting in Amman on Tuesday, we have engaged our regional counterparts to understand their efforts to help the Syrian people, assess how we can help, and encourage them to do more. If they are engaging the regime, we are stressing the need to leverage these engagements for outcomes that will benefit all Syrians, including pressing Assad to allow unhindered access to all affected communities. On February 9th, the administration issued General License Number 23 under the Syria Sanctions Program to ensure that for a limited time, anyone providing critical emergency aid to victims of the earthquake in Syria could do so without risk of U.S. sanctions. We are taking General License 23 as an opportunity to shape regional countries' engagement in provision of aid. We want countries to help meet the enormous and legitimate needs of the Syrian people while remaining vigilant against the Syrian regime diverting aid. We believe that countries providing assistance need to press the regime and other local actors to allow cross-line deliveries and equitable distribution of aid. With so many countries involved in providing assistance to the Syrian people, they have leverage to make these demands. We have also impressed upon regional counterparts the need to channel aid through humanitarian organizations. We are careful to ensure that no U.S. government assistance is provided through the Syrian regime or via designated organizations. We continue to reach those directly affected through our humanitarian partners on the ground. At the UN, we are working with UN officials and agencies to expand access and monitor implementation of existing arrangements. At the Security Council, we are advocating for more Security Council action to expand reliable access to the UN cross-border aid. As we focus on addressing the enormous humanitarian needs following the tragic earthquake, we remain committed to advancing a UN-facilitated, Syrian-led political process in line with UN Security Council Resolution 2254 and to improving the situation on the ground for millions of Syrians. This administration continues to focus on expanding humanitarian access throughout Syria, preserving our military presence in partnership with the Syrian Democratic Forces to keep pressure on ISIS, sustaining local ceasefires in place across the country, and our commitment to accountability from the Assad regime and the preservation of international norms, such as promoting human rights and non-proliferation, including through the imposition of targeted sanctions. All of these are important steps to advancing a broader political settlement consistent with Security Council Resolution 2254. I also want to underscore that U.S. policy towards Syria remains unchanged. We will not normalize relations with the Assad regime absent enduring progress toward a political solution. We will oppose reconstruction directed by or for the Assad regime, and we will not lift sanctions against the Assad regime or its enablers. We have made clear in our diplomatic discussions with partner countries, both in the Middle East and beyond, that we do not support normalizing relations with the Assad regime. In those discussions, we continue to emphasize the Assad regime's horrific atrocities against Syrians, as well as its ongoing efforts to deny much of the country access to humanitarian aid and security. We also have made clear that U.S. sanctions remain in place and that investing in Syria risks exposure to U.S. sanctions. We continue to remind them of the importance of the international crossing points in the Northwest. We note the opening of 2 more points since the earthquake, which clearly demonstrates the dangerous inadequacy of just having 1 point, and the need to keep all 3 crossing points open going forward. Last week, we observed the 12th anniversary of the start of the Syrian uprising. For 12 years now, Syrians have been confronted with human tragedy on an unimaginable scale. The plight of the Syrian people must remain front and center. They cannot be abandoned. One way to do so is by promoting accountability for the human rights abuses and violations that the Assad regime, backed by its Russian and Iranian allies, has inflicted upon the Syrian people for well over a decade. We welcome the launch of the Syrian Accountability Working Group earlier this morning. There can be no impunity for the individuals who ordered and carried out these transgressions, and we look forward to working with Syrian civil society to advance accountability efforts. The United States remains committed to supporting the Syrian people and the UN in their pursuit of a political resolution to the conflict that brings about a durable, stable, and just peace in Syria. Together, let us continue to do the work necessary to achieve a better future for the Syrian people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, Bill Bildrich. We had a few questions for you, if you don't mind. We're gonna ask them, and so do not waste time. We have prepared them from before. In your discussions with U.S. partners in the region, what explanations are they offering for normalizing with the Assad regime?
Okay, so we know some regional countries support normalizing relations with the Assad regime and argue that bringing back Syria into the Arab fold could help counter Iranian influence in Syria or solve refugee problems or advance the political process. Others are frustrated with the lack of progress in Syria and suggest that increasing engagement with the regime may be the only way to break the current deadlock. We're also frustrated with the lack of progress, but for the United States, we see normalizing relations before Assad has taken any meaningful step toward a political solution is only going to embolden him to remain intransigent and prolong the status quo. So, for our part, we are not normalizing relations, and we continue to press anyone who is engaging with the regime to use the opportunity to leverage concessions that would help the Syrian people both in the wake of the earthquake and in pushing toward 2254 implementation. Assad, who continues to commit horrific atrocities against Syrians, should not get anything for free, including these engagements. And we'll continue to work closely with our partners and allies to ensure that any engagements with the Assad regime are maximizing benefits for the Syrian people while continuing to maintain our own principled stance against normalization.
Okay, thank you. Dependence on the UN for humanitarian aid delayed assistance to earthquake victims in northwest Syria. Is the U.S. considering alternatives to the UN?
So another good question. Well before the earthquake, the U.S. was focused on ways to become less dependent on the UN, on the cross-border mechanism, including by moving toward humanitarian assistance via NGOs. So even before the earthquake struck, I think we realized that the more that we can graduate away from this mechanism and the renewals every 6 months, the better. But certainly the earthquake has demonstrated all the more so the need to not be dependent just on the UN mechanism. But meanwhile, we have to maximize what we can using the existing mechanisms. So the UN has made consistently clear that it requires the consent of the Syrian regime and UN Security Council resolution to provide cross-border humanitarian assistance into Syria. So that's a UN requirement. So at the moment, we'll continue to push for a renewal of the resolution. It will come up for renewal again in July for the existing crossing, and we'll look at the situation with the 2 new crossings. So when the regime gave its authorization for 2 new crossings, they said it was for 90 days. So I think we should all be watching what's happening around May 14. If they extend their authorization or whatever, that would be a good sign. If they don't extend it, I think that would be an indication, a bad indication on any commitment that they also have on the humanitarian situation. That's it for that question.
Okay, thank you. We are receiving reports from northeastern Syria of increasing popular dissatisfaction with the SDF, SDC rule in Arab areas, which tends to be mainly Kurdish rule over Arab areas. What are the implications of this for the anti-ISIS counterinsurgency campaign?
So I would say first, through our stabilization programs and our engagement with local authorities in northeast Syria, we actively encourage and promote transparency and broad inclusivity in local governance, and we see this as an important part of our work to stabilize areas liberated from ISIS. We have a senior representative for Northeast Syria who's there right now with a very small State Department team, and they work at engaging local actors. Sometimes we also have a USAID colleague there as well. So again, the small U.S. government team engages with local actors from across communities and components in Northeast Syria, including tribal leaders in Arab majority areas, non-affiliated and independent Kurdish leaders, and members of the Syriac, Turkoman, and other communities. And these engagements allow us to understand concerns, to effectively advocate for broader representation and inclusivity of all communities and components in local governance. So again, in the work that we do and the assistance that we provide in Northeast Syria, this is one of our aims, to make sure things become more diverse and pluralistic.
Thank you so much. Sorry, he wanted to say something.
Can I ask a quick question? Thank you so much for hosting this important event, and thank you for your time, sir, and for your remarks here today. And thank you for your remarks to the Holocaust Museum. Of course, it is a bare minimum that the United States will not normalize with the Assad regime, and thank God we're committed to that. I was wondering though, could we, under the previous administrations, President Trump, President Obama, whenever we saw normalization, whenever we saw these sort of steps being taken, like we've seen from the UAE, Jordanians, others, we would pick up the phone from the State Department, we would make public statements on, in different ways, sometimes at a very high level. We've seen from Congress condemnation of that 21-gun salute on the anniversary of the revolution of a guy who committed genocidal massacres. We don't know what privately has been going on, but we of course encourage that. But can you give the commitment today to Citizens for the State to Secure America and the wider Syrian American community that we will make a public statement from the State Department at whatever highest level we can, condemning this 21-gun salute and this insanity that happened by an ally, the UAE? Because if we don't, this is a trend that will continue, especially as the UAE continues to be the flag bearer for normalization of the Assad regime. Can we get that commitment from you to make a public condemnation of the UAE over that?
So again, what I said in the speech, what we're trying to do is when a government is engaging with the regime, we are trying to push them to contribute to the international goals that we have. First of all, on earthquake assistance. Second of all, on the long-term goals under Resolution 2254. Certainly we're not encouraging the kind of thing that we saw in the UAE in the visit on Monday. Certainly Assad does not deserve that kind of welcome, but again, where we think we can be of most help to the Syrian people right now is to make sure that anyone who is engaging with the regime is doing it for in a way that will contribute, benefit to the Syrian people. So that's where we're coming from.
Thank you. So veering away from previous administrations, no more public condemnations if we see things like that. I understand. Thank you for your time, but thanks for the answer.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, that was our dear friend Moaz Mustafa, who is representing the Syrian Emergency Task Force. SETF has thankfully co-sponsored and helped make this event possible. So thank you very much. And thank you very much, Das Goldrich, for your time. And thank you for your kind remarks. And hopefully no more normalization with Assad, and with the continuous support of the United States government, maybe hopefully other countries will stop doing that, and we can push back on this kind of agenda from these countries. Thank you. Our next speaker is Larry Sachs, who serves as Deputy Assistant to the Administrator of USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. Prior to joining BHA, Mr. Sachs served as the Mission Director for both USAID Colombia and USAID EI El Salvador's bilateral and regional portfolio. Mr. Sachs has more than 20 years of experience in international development and diplomacy. Please, Mr. Sachs, we would love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you so much, George, for that introduction, and thanks to the Citizens for a Safe and Secure America for inviting me here today. It's a real privilege to join my colleague, Deputy Assistant Secretary Ethan Goldrich, and a true honor to speak to all of you, the Syrian American community who have been so profoundly impacted by the recent devastating earthquakes. First, let me offer my and USAID's deepest and most sincere condolences to those who are coping with unimaginable loss and destruction within communities. I recognize, as it does Goldrich, that many of you are deeply concerned about your families and loved ones, and the United States recognizes the indescribable toll the earthquakes and aftershocks have taken, and we're proud to stand firmly aside the people of Syria at this very difficult moment. Sadly, and as we all know, the earthquakes have exacerbated the trying conditions that already persisted in northwest Syria from over a decade of war. Our hearts are heavy with stories of those who have fled their homes time and time again due to conflict, and families who are displaced once more as a result of this devastating earthquake. This tragedy also serves to highlight what we already knew, that humanitarian access to the people of northwest Syria is vital to saving lives and reducing human suffering. The United States has and will continue to prioritize and advocate for sustained and unfettered access to northwest Syria. Of course, the constraints of reaching people in northwest Syria with humanitarian assistance didn't start on February 6th, but the pre-existing impediments faced by the humanitarian community were cast in a new light when this unimaginable tragedy struck. Natural disasters, as we also know, don't know borders, and the response shouldn't be restrained by them. So the United States has not wavered in our commitment to ensuring access to areas with life-saving humanitarian aid, and will continue to pursue it. Following the earthquakes, the United States responded immediately and robustly to ensure that our humanitarian response reached the people of Syria along with the people of Turkey. And rest assured that our efforts have focused on supporting all people affected by the earthquakes across both countries, and particularly those with the greatest humanitarian need. In the aftermath of the earthquake, USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance surged large-scale support to the White Helmets in northwest Syria to provide critical fuel, equipment, supplies, transportation, and medical services for disaster response efforts. These teams were able to reach those those facing the most life-threatening humanitarian need, including in remote areas and sites with displaced Syrian people. I'm proud to share that USAID has provided nearly $90 million to humanitarian partners in Syria to respond to the earthquakes. This is translated into critical health support to those injured and into life-saving food, water, relief supplies for those who have lost so much. We know that in the immediate aftermath of the disaster, the first responders are often the members of the impacted community, so we focused our support to enable local organizations on the ground to provide temporary shelter, warm winter clothing, blankets, and fuel, amongst other support, to those facing freezing winter temperatures in the hardest hit areas of Idlib and northern Aleppo. I want to stress that this support is in addition to the United States' substantial assistance for the long-running humanitarian crisis, which last year totaled over $1.8 billion. Working with an NGO partner, we dispatched mobile medical units to support displaced populations in the same areas. We also deployed 50 community health workers to surgical hospitals, multiple surgical teams, and immediately dispatched ambulances to affected areas. To address the trauma that the earthquake caused, we deployed mobile mental health and psychosocial support units with mental health professionals and other specialists. Of course, the story is much deeper than the numbers. Most importantly, we're having a direct impact on Syrian families and individual lives. Our history of working in northwest Syria allowed us to hit the ground really sprinting, and we are deeply proud to stand with the Syrian people as we have during the 12 years of war, and we're able to quickly adapt and scale up to respond to the overwhelming need. Additionally, utilizing critical aid we had pre-positioned across the region previously, we were able to dispatch medical supplies to 68 health facilities in northwest Syria by February 9th, just 3 days after the earthquake struck. We were also able to dispatch pre-positioned food rations, which provided life-saving food to 730,000 people in opposition-held areas in northwest Syria. Our assistance cannot and will not stop after the cameras have moved and the earthquake is no longer on the front pages. And we know that disasters of this magnitude are catastrophic with long-lasting effects. For example, the earthquake caused severe damage to water infrastructure and sewage line. lines, impeding already perilous access to safe drinking water and hygiene facilities. And if there's no improvement, we could see a rise in cholera cases and outbreaks of other infectious diseases exacerbated by overcrowding in displacement sites. We are focused on this, and we've reached more than 300,000 people in northwest Syria with emergency water and hygiene supplies to prevent disease and keep families healthy. We will also continue responding to needs for health, emergency shelter, relief supplies, and food. And let me just be clear, now is not the time to pull back. Recovery from a disaster of this magnitude is never an easy process, even in the best of conditions. And we all know that the conditions in northwest Syria, driven by the Assad regime's violence, have been dire for many years. I can assure you today that we will not turn our backs on the Syrian people. We will continue to respond robustly to the humanitarian crisis and continue to press other countries to do so as well. Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this exchange on the impacts of our humanitarian efforts and to assure the Syrian American community that the United States is committed to firmly standing with the Syrian people. And we'll continue to utilize our platform and our resources to catalyze and bring together the international community. And we look forward to continuing these efforts to help save lives in Syria. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Larry, if you don't mind, we had a question prepared
Sure.
to ask you about this. Are funding alternatives to the UN being considered for humanitarian aid inside of Syria?
Sure. Kind of building off the comments of Das Goldrich, we do work closely not only with UN agencies, but we also work with NGO partners and international relief organizations that support our humanitarian efforts in Syria. In fact, our NGO partners receive about 60% of our funding, and they're helping to deliver humanitarian assistance in a wide range of sectors, from food and water and sanitation and health and a range of different areas, including multi-purpose cash. We have 7 NGOs that are delivering critical health services to earthquake-affected populations in Syria. And we don't only provide assistance to the organizations, but we recognize that by listening to them and engaging with them directly, we get a better understanding of what the dynamics are in the communities where we're trying to provide the assistance, and we're able to take their recommendations on how to better deliver it.
So the reason for that is because we've noticed that relying on the UN has caused disastrous delays in relief for earthquake victims in northwestern Syria. Members of the Assad regimes actually have personally benefited from the UN aid contracts and regime-controlled areas. And I think we'd all agree this is not the best way to use our taxpayer dollars. And the least we can rely on UN assistance, the better it has become for Syria and the people of Syria, because we know then the money and the assistance is going directly to the people, not to the Assad regime and their supporters. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
We have a Senator Shane is here. She wants to speak. Sorry. I apologize. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Hey, thanks so much. Yes.
Okay. Thanks. We'll keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Would you mind doing this? We'll make sure you leave immediately. I know you asked us for it.
Well, we're in the middle of both, so.
I know. Well, thank you so much.
We are so thankful.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'm good. How are you? Well, I'm gonna, if I sit down, everybody see me and can I see everyone? See, I used to be a teacher and so I like to see my class. But I'm really here because I wanted to share 3 simple messages with all of you. First of all, my condolences on the terrible tragedy that has happened in Syria and Turkey because of the earthquake. And as you all know, it compounds the 12 years of civil war and the horrible humanitarian crises that have been precipitated by the Assad regime. I think all of all of America has looked at what's happening there and is horrified. And the challenge is how to do something about what's happening in Syria until we get rid of Assad. And that clearly needs, I believe that needs to happen.
Yes, we all agree.
And, you know, my third point is how important the work that you all do is to keeping the attention of the United States and the world on what's happening in Syria. I've had a chance through Mohammed and the Syrian community in New Hampshire to hear some of what's happened in the country, to see it as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and Armed Services Committee, to have those briefings and hear firsthand what's going on. And it is such a tragedy. And for all of you who've had family, for many of you who were born and grew up in Syria, to see that happen to your home country, I can only imagine how you must feel. And to have that compounded by this earthquake and the tragedy that that's meant. You know, as a politician and somebody in government, when something happens, you always want to feel like you've got to have a way to fix it, to do something to address the challenges. And we've been focused for a number of years on what we might do in terms of our foreign policy to try and address what's happening in Syria. One of the things that I continue to work on is to try and address what's happening in the detainee camps in Syria, to try and see if we can't repatriate the people who are there to their countries, those who are not from Syria, and also to address the humanitarian conditions in the camps as well. So I don't have to tell all of you how much needs to be done in the country, but I will tell you that I stand ready to try and help in any way I can. And don't underestimate how important your voices are as we look at what needs to be done there, because it is the fact that you all have kept the focus on that means that Larry and the DAS from the State Department were here and that those efforts continue to be underway. So thank you all very much. I wish I could hear the rest of the conversation this afternoon, but I appreciate it. And I hear from Mohammed anyway, so he keeps me informed. And as we're in this season of Ramadan, I know this is a time when people are thinking even more about what's happening in communities. So thank you all very much.
Maybe we need to have another one of those dinners.
We do.
Right?
I just want to say just quickly, thank you, Senator, so much again for taking the time. Very busy week. I know yesterday it was 2 back-to-back hearings, at the Senate Foreign Relations and the Appropriation Committees, and today as well. So again, we appreciate that so much. And you're always a strong voice. We always, love to hear your voice on those briefings, and you always stand for the right thing. So thank you again for coming today and showing your support to the community. Thank you.
Syrian hero. You are a Syrian hero.
Thank you.
I see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually. We have Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon could not make it, but he sent us a letter that he wanted us to read on his behalf. This letter, he wants it to be on the record that he wanted to join us and wanted to send this letter in his name. Greetings. My thoughts are with everyone affected by the devastating earthquake that hit Syria and Turkey in February. The images and stories that have emerged are absolutely heart-wrenching, and I'm thinking of the families who lost loved ones and those who were injured. The devastation is heartbreaking, and so many have lost everything. Following the earthquake, along with my colleagues, I introduced a bipartisan resolution expressing deepest condolences and solidarity with the people of Turkey and Syria.
and calling for robust humanitarian aid following the catastrophic earthquake and powerful aftershocks. I will continue to push for the U.S. to be a strong international partner in helping the people of both nations to recover and rebuild after these horrific events. I want to thank Citizens for a Secure and Safe America, C4SSA, for their advocacy on behalf of the people of Syria at this critical and challenging time. I will keep fighting to ensure that the people of Syria and Turkey have the resources they need to rebuild their lives and communities. All my best, Jeffrey Merkley, U.S. State Senator. Thank you. Come over here. Our next speaker is our dear friend Muaz Mustafa, the Director for Syrian Emergency Task Force. I did give you a great introduction, but I mean everybody here knows you, and he's one of our family. I don't introduce my brother, so I'll let you speak and talk to us about the stuff you're working on and everything you want to talk about. Oh, sorry.
Just a quick comment. I think Muaz was so generous with us that he came and helped again prepare for this conference, despite his 10 trips maybe in the last 2 weeks. I just follow him on Twitter and I know where he is. He's in Qatar, inside Syria, and Idlib, in Azaz, and Turkey. So he's an engine, he's a machine. So we're thankful for his joining us today, and of course for his work. And if he can update us on some of that work that he's been doing and his visits recently, it would be very very helpful and productive, and we can hopefully work together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Becker, and thank you to Citizens for a Safe and Secure America for all the work that you're doing in this very important event, getting the State Department, getting members of the House and Senate to come and speak about Syria. That is priceless, is incredibly important, and this needs to continuously go. We did very little to do anything here, except we were honored to be invited to this event. It really is, and thank you for inviting us. I'm here with my colleague, Vera, who's behind the scenes and is our Director of Advocacy at the CTF. And we want to, going forward, constantly work in close coordination with your organization and with all of you to make sure that we do all we can to bring an end to the Assad regime. I think today there was a big piece of news. The fact is that Ethan Goldridge said that they are not willing to publicly condemn a 21-gun salute for the UAE. I think that is actually an accomplishment to have that on record and to be able to know how do we proceed going forward with Congress and the media to ensure that the administration goes back to what both Republican and Democratic administrations before it, where whenever somebody hosted Assad, they got a call privately, there was a very public statement, there were tweets, there were everything that needs to happen again. Otherwise, we'll continue to see these regimes that are willing to talk to Assad once again. I just came back from Syria, I think the night before last. Since the earthquake, we went there a few times, 3 times. And this last trip I want to announce here, I know this is kind of, I was supposed to announce it, but I feel like this is the right place. But 60 Minutes was in Syria for 2 full days. They spent the night there. They will be airing around April 2nd, I think. So there's an air date, which is really great. And they had a chance to sit down with medical workers, including Syrian doctors and Syrian American doctors from the Syrian American Medical Society, rescue workers and people from neighborhoods that were saving themselves because nobody came in after, but including the white helmets as well that they talked to. And of course, the victims of the earthquake and the bombardment. And I can tell you it was a very powerful story. Everyone, from me to the producers, to the cameramen, the sound guys, Top Heli, everybody was crying, in each one of these conversations. It is that bad. When you go into Syria, you don't see anything. Yeah, we do give aid as the United States through the UN. Most of that gets stolen by the Assad regime. We do give a good amount of aid through things like Bahar organizations, Syrian American Medical Society, White Helmets, through these NGOs, but it's all very little. There's nobody there. You see people still digging for their loved ones' now bodies, using rudimentary things. The heavy machinery didn't even arrive till everybody died. And the Assad regime knew all of this. He's very vindictive. I mean, he waited long enough. And of course, the UN has treated him pretty much like their Secretary General in terms of giving them the ability and approval to cross borders. that he has no control over on either side. So what we had worked on was to try to bring in as many journalists into northwest Syria as possible after the earthquake. Because at the beginning, you remember a lot of the news was sanctions, was stopping the aid. That's all untrue. Sanctions do not affect the aid. But since then, we've had 30 journalists go into northwest Syria, a lot of articles, and hopefully the 60-minute story coming in April will bring again more attention to all of it. And I do want to say that there are like 2 other 60-minute stories planned down the line as well in the coming months. And that's just one way in the media to continue the pressure. I think the work that's being done here by Citizens for a Safe and Secure America has been really important, and the work that's being done by members of Congress and others that know the plight of the Syrian people is really important as well. So I would say be on the lookout for yet another, not resolution this time, but bill that will hopefully come through that will be focused on the normalization efforts and focused on and calling out specific countries that have taken these steps, like the United Arab Emirates or Bahrain, Jordan, any other country, friendly or not, to the revolution or to anything, that thinks about reapproaching Assad should find that there is a price to be paid. At the same time, I think I've been texting some of my friends and journalists about the importance of this meeting and who's here, and I think there might be a couple of articles that will also come out to push in the same direction based on this event. So thank you again for doing this, making it happen. I also want to mention that on the accountability front, there's a lot that's being done, not just in Europe, but also in the United States. And that in the coming months, God willing, we'll have civil and criminal cases that will be made public against the Assad regime. We need all of this because we need the administration to do much, much more. We have friends in the administration. We also have a lot of people that are just kind of being okay with this unfolding the way it is. But anyway, I don't want to go on too long. You guys know more than I what's happening in Syria and everything, and it's just a pleasure to be here. The Syrian Emergency Task Force is proud to be a partner and friend and family of Citizens for a Safe and Secure America, and thank you all for taking the time to listen.
Thank you. I just want to let you know that we have a few congressmen and senators that might be stopping by, but there's a vote on the Hill, so there's a huge possibility they're not coming. We know that at least one of them is coming around 2:30. So until they show up, let's make this a
Yes, exactly.
please. Sam, you said you want to ask some more? What do you want to do? You want to do the introduction? Yeah. Please do. Yeah, we had a nice time with the congressman back. We're all from, so this is the Massachusetts crew over here, all 4 of us.
Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Congressman Seth Moulton. He represents the 6th District in Massachusetts. He has served in Iraq in 4 tours, I believe, and he embodies the American values as far as I'm concerned. We are thrilled to have him as our representative, and without further ado.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here with this great Massachusetts crew. Some champions here, but I'm really here to talk about what you're all going through back home. As someone who spent a good deal of my life in the Middle East, Iraq in particular, is some places very, very close to my heart. I have a lot of Middle Eastern friends, including Turkish and Syrian friends, and it's a tough feeling being over here so far from the tragedy and devastation that you're living through, and feeling like I wish I could do more to help. But part of the importance of your visit today is to educate us lawmakers on what we can do to help more, and because this is a tragedy of unimaginable scale. And I cannot imagine what you are going through, your families, your friends, and trying to think about how you come back from this and recover when the damage is so vast, the destruction is so deep. So that's why I wanted to be here, and I only have a couple of minutes because we're in the middle of voting actually on the House side, so I have to hustle back over so I don't miss a vote. But I wanted to be sure I came, and I hope you're hearing from a lot of us.
With me.
Thank you.
Would you like to sign the book with our?
This is a condolences book.
Condolences.
Oh, wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, and while the congressman is signing that, the condolences, I want to say that this House bill that passed last month about the earthquake and disaster strongly talks about Assad, being the one of the primary unfortunate event that happened to Syrians. So we really appreciate the House strong stand against Assad and normalization with Assad. So we want to ensure that this voice continues to be loud and clear about Assad being the criminal of Syria.
Absolutely.
Congressman Moulton, I wanted to bring up to your attention, when we had that nice evening at Sam's house, you had mentioned, sorry,
Okay, thanks.
you had mentioned that you'd be very happy and willing to travel to Northeast or Northwest Syria if the opportunity is there, and the Holocaust Museum is planning a trip over there, if you'd be
Send me the
interested.
information. Okay.
Absolutely.
I gotta go, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wake up on time.
يعطيكم العافية. I'm sorry I couldn't make it today. I just missed my flight.
Voice, rise it.
Raise your voice, please.
I'm sorry I couldn't make it today. I missed my flight, but I just have comment about what the discussion going on right now. We have to think about if we want to be stable in Syria and a stable nation in Syria and Syria recovered. Assad has to go. This is not something we wish. It's something necessarily to build the future of Syria. Cannot be, the nation cannot come together again and negotiate a solution or social contract again and live together again while this regime exists. It's a fact. Number two, if the Saudi Arabia and Emirates and all these countries, they think they can separate Assad from Iran, they are totally wrong. Unfortunately, when Assad, the connection between Assad and Iran is not today, is not in 2011, it's back in 70s when Syria went, how Assad went against all the Arab and the Iran-Iraqi war, and they went and they support Iran. So at that time they couldn't separate Assad father from the Iran, and now they are trying to separate Assad, the son, from Iran, which is in his weakness point, where he doesn't control anything in Syria. So the second argument is false because it cannot happen due to the fact that Assad does not control anything in Syria except he's in his home or in his Muhajirin, Qasr al-Muhajirin, and he cannot control more than that. His guards, as Dr. Mustafa mentioned, they are Iranians. The third one, even if you want to rebuild Syria, you need about $700 billion to rebuild it the way it was before 2011. No country has this money now. No country will take their money from their nations and put it in Syria. We've seen the fourth one is none the allies.
Sorry, can you raise your voice a little bit more? I just can't hear you.
Yeah, the third one, the fourth one, which is I'm going to conclude with this one. No country will take their money, their nation's money, to put it in Syria to rebuild Syria with Assad's regime existing and destroying the Syria in the future after 5 years. So we've seen how he destroyed the country for in the last 10 years, 12 years, and the war, and how he sold the country actually to Russia and to Iran. So this guy and his regime cannot be trusted to rebuild Syria again. And the evidence of that, we've seen it when the earthquake happened. We've seen how he react and his regime react toward the victims of the Northwest Syria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Special thanks to our next speaker who was able to make it despite I know they're in voting and they're running around. It's a hassle, but thank you so much for coming. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy represents the 8th Congressional District of Illinois. He is a ranking member of the Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the U.S. and Chinese Communist Party. He also serves on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Committee on Oversight and Accountability. Thank you, Congressman.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, very good, very good. Well, it's an honor to be with you, and as I like to say, it's an honor to be any place that can pronounce my name right.
Yes, I said it right.
You did say it right. You said it perfectly. And so I feel very much at home with this group. As you know, I've been with you before, and it's so nice to be with you again. And of course, whenever Dr. Weiss says jump, I say how high and when. So it's great to be here. And you have a lot of friends in Congress. I see it's a bipartisan group of friends, which is even better. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, my deepest condolences go out to the people of Syria and Turkey and the whole region that has been shaken, literally and figuratively, by this recent earthquake. And so we have to do everything in our power first to help people in their time of humanitarian need. And I know that all of you have stepped up in dramatic ways to help our fellow brothers and sisters, human beings, cope with this unspeakable tragedy. And we will continue to do so. So whatever I and my office and we in Congress can do, you need to let us know and we need to do it. That's about as simple as I can say.
Thank you.
Second point is we will not forget the people of Syria. We will not forget what is happening there. We will not forget the crimes that Bashar al-Assad has committed against his own people. We will not forget that these people yearn for the very freedoms and liberties that we enjoy here in the United States. And so we have to continue to agitate for them to be allowed to participate more meaningfully in the governance of their country. And that means that we have to continue with our sanctions, we have to continue with our legislation, we have to continue with our efforts, and we have to continue with our awareness. Am I right about that?
Yes.
We can't give up, we can't forget, we can't stop doing what we're doing, we just have to keep doing more of it. And what I find around here is that persistence does pay off. And the more that we make friends, and the longer that this list becomes, the more likely it is that our legislation becomes a reality, okay? Third and final point is this. As was mentioned before, I'm the ranking member and top Democrat of the new Select Committee on China. Tonight, very interestingly, we are having a primetime hearing about the genocide of Uyghurs. And I think all of you know the facts, but the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, has committed a genocide against a whole people. They want to erase their culture, they want to erase their identity merely because of their religion, namely that they're Muslim. And in this second night of Ramadan, by the way, Ramadan Mubarak, to all of you who are celebrating.
Thank you.
We have to remember now more than ever their plight. And remember that what is happening to them can happen anywhere. And remember that the techno surveillance repression that is going on within the PRC can be exported elsewhere. It can be used to go up against dissidents, critics, people who would speak out about the CCP anywhere in the world. And for that matter, it is going to be used by people like Bashar al-Assad. It's going to be used by dictators around the world. And so we have to remember this, and that's why we're shining a light on the Uyghur genocide. I am going to continue to fight against the internment of 2 million Uyghur people. The fact that 500,000 children have been taken from their parents. The fact that tens of thousands of women have been forced to endure sterilizations and other unspeakable acts of violations of human rights. And so I'm going to continue to fight, but I need all of you to join with me in this fight. Because even at the same time that we are going to always advocate for the people of Syria, it's my belief that standing with our brothers and sisters around the world is the right thing to do, and they will help us too. So with that, I just want to say thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for being here. I close with my favorite saying, which is yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why we call it the present. And so I'm honored and blessed to be with you here to share a few minutes of your precious time as we as we kind of celebrate Ramadan together, but also remember our friends, family, and others who are going through a very difficult time. We will not forget them. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a book that we created here that is for the loving memory of the people who passed in Syria. If you would, it'd be honored if you'd sign it as well as other Congress.